Trust your tingle and coordinate our attacks, okay?
Yes. Okay. Let's pick one target.
Right.
We take them off the board one at a time.
There, you got it. Okay, Peter 1, Peter 2.
Peter 2.
Peter 3.
Peter 3.
Oh, Andrew Garfield, always destined to be Peter number 3. Or is he? Let's take a closer look and see if we can redeem Garfield's Spider-Man. Hey y'all, and welcome back to Carbon Scoring, the best place for comics history and action figures. We're going to take a look at the figures produced from the amazing Spider-Man film starring Andrew Garfield, who's always sort of gotten the short end of the stick. Tom Holland has appeared in 6 films as the Web-Slinger, while our first Spidey, Tobey Maguire, completed his own trilogy. But bringing up the rear is Andrew Garfield, whose series was canceled after only 2 films. It's the same for action figures. I have huge tubs of Maguire and Holland toys, but for Garfield, it's just a pint-sized box. So while Toy Biz and Hasbro were making wave after wave of figures for Tobey and Tom, there have only been 4 mass-market 6-inch figures made from Andrew Garfield's time in the webs. But why? Spider-Man was still a huge draw, and the movies ended up making $1.5 billion worldwide. So why is Andrew Garfield always Peter number 3? I'm sure Tobey and Tom love being Spider-Man, but neither of them showed up at San Diego Comic-Con and did this.
So thanks for having me. You have no idea how much this means to me.
Let's go through the good and the bad, the ups and the downs of Andrew Garfield's amazing Spider-Man, and see if we can get to the bottom of why these films and figures are so divisive. If you want to help us grow the channel, hit that join button. For the price of a cup of coffee per month, or one Marvel Legends figure for the whole year, you get access to exclusive unboxing videos and inside information on all our upcoming plans. So here are the figures that I have from the first Amazing Spider-Man movie, and as we go through each of these, I think it's going to really clearly show the good and the bad, the positives and the negatives of the film. So let's go ahead and begin with the Hasbro standard Spider-Man. So I believe this was a Walmart exclusive figure. He is the 6-inch scale. He's maybe a little bit small, just a little on the small side, but I kind of like my Spideys a little bit on the small side. But clearly the first thing that you're going to note is this is the biggest departure from the comic book Spider-Man costume that we had seen previously or since on film. And you know what? I've got absolutely no problem with that. The Sam Raimi, Tobey Maguire movies were so incredibly faithful to the source material. They had such an accurate portrayal of Peter's origin. They used classic villains. And even though it was 5 years later, even though Amazing Spider-Man premiered in 2012 and Spider-Man 3 was from 2007, that's not a long time for people. And so wanting to kind of distinguish your sets of films from the previous ones, I think is really important. And so the most obvious way that you do that, other than changing the lead actor, is changing the look of Spider-Man. And that's what they've done here. Now, this is immediately recognizable as Spider-Man. It's not like you look at this and go, oh, hey, Green Lantern. I mean, it's clearly not that, but it is different. And they even made a point of this in the film. They have the scene where Andrew is kind of designing his costume and he's looking on the internet at different pictures and he's like spandex, spandex, spandex. So they wanted to get away from just the pure spandex. And so this has more of a rubbery kind of look to it on screen. And I think that comes across pretty well in this figure. Still has a nice shine to it. You have all of the detail in the, the ribbing of the costume, but it doesn't look like spandex. It looks more like something that, I don't know, like a biker or would wear. And of course, maybe most controversially, but I think it actually works, the gold lenses. And they show Andrew as Peter Parker taking the lenses out of his sunglasses and putting them in the costume. But what this also represents is a much more modern look for Spider-Man. The classic costume with the, spandex or the cloth, whatever it was back in the 1960s, was very much rooted in that era. Whereas this figure definitely seems to be coming from a more modern approach and take. He's got kind of cool shoes with the silver soles. It looks like kind of a cool tracksuit. And that played into where they headed with the basis for this story, which a lot of the beats from this movie came from the Ultimate Spider-Man comics, the comics that were created by Brian Michael Bendis and Mark Bagley. And I think that was really smart. Now, they've done a lot of that with Tom Holland's movies. They've certainly taken beats from the Ultimate Comics with those as well, but never was it more prominent than some of the things that they managed to do with this movie. See, I'm sitting here playing with a 10-year-old figure and his wrist pops off. It's occupational hazard around here at Carbon Scoring. So not only did you have this modern look, but you had kind of a modern take on the character. And one of the clearest places that we saw that was the relationship between Pete and Gwen. So in the Ultimate Comics, it wasn't Gwen, it was actually Mary Jane, but they're basically playing the same character. In the comics, Mary Jane is smart. She is a match for Peter. She is, fully capable on her own. And we saw that in Emma Stone's portrayal of Gwen Stacy. They basically substituted the names, but kept the characters the same. And much like what we saw in the Ultimate Comics, Mary Jane in the comics found out that Peter Parker was Spider-Man in issue 13. So very, very early in the run. And the same can be said for in this movie. And so that adds a different dynamic than what we saw in the Sam Raimi trilogy, where Mary Jane doesn't find out until maybe the end of the first movie, but definitely not until the second movie. Here, Emma Stone as Gwen Stacy is kind of an equal partner in Peter's life the whole way along. So you can see where they took some of those kind of cool modern vibes out of the modern books and brought them in. The next version of the main suit came from Marvel Select or Diamond Select, and I really think this is probably the best plastic version of this Amazing Spider-Man #1 suit. I mean, just look at how much detail they put into the face sculpt and the eyes, and they really bring out that gold. Plus, every single one of these web lines is raised and painted. You still have all of the ribbing and etching on the costume, but because of the ability to have more detail, more of those kind of track lines, that athletic wear lines show up on this figure. He's maybe a little bit bulky, maybe the frame of this one is more accurate to the screen. I think these shoulders that he has, while they look really great and they look totally super heroic, they're maybe a little bit big compared to Andrew Garfield's frame, but this is a really, really terrific figure, one that I absolutely love. And it came with an alternate version that featured an Andrew Garfield head sculpt. And I can see it. I can clearly see Andrew Garfield's face in this sculpt. He's got the kind of wild, crazy hair. He has that sort of long, angular face. It's really good. But one of the things I like about this figure is that it comes with his web shooters. And that is another thing that I think this movie did right. So the Sam Raimi trilogy, famously, Peter Parker had organic web shooters. And look, I get it. That makes sense. It honestly makes more sense if you're bitten by a radioactive spider, you gain spider powers, you can cling to walls, you have a spider sense, which spiders don't have, but we'll forget that for a minute. Why would you not also gain the ability to make webs? I mean, it simplifies the storytelling. It truly, in the grand scheme of the story, makes more sense. But it loses one of the things that is the most special about Peter Parker, and that is the fact he was already special before the spider bit him. And the fact that he could make web shooters, that he at home could create web shooters, shows that Peter Parker is more than just the radioactive spider. He was a special, special person prior to that. And I was really glad that they brought those back. And I'm glad they kept them in the Tom Holland movies. And I'm equally glad that they made fun of all of that in No Way From Home when they kind of, were all three together. That was pretty terrific. This version is, basically the exact same sculpt, but really, really solid head sculpt. I definitely do enjoy that very much. And we also got two versions of the regular suit in the Mini-Mates. We've got the plain suited version, which Again, we've talked about mini-mates before on this channel. It's just remarkable the level of detail that they can get into such a small figure. I mean, you see the rib lines, you get the different textures of his costume. They do a great job with the gold eyelets. But we also got, oh, he lost a foot. We also got the battle damaged version. And where this one stands out, of course, he's got some scuffing on his costume. The mask comes off and reveals a battle-damaged Andrew Garfield head sculpt underneath. So very cool. But out of the mini-mates, perhaps the best one is the Andrew Garfield Peter Parker. And it's crazy, but I mean, I can really see it. I mean, can't you guys see that Andrew Garfield, just in that simple design, you know, they bring in those cheekbones to give him that angular face, even though he has the same square round face that everybody else in this line has. He's got his skateboard, cool guy backpack slung over just one shoulder. Really, really strong. But another thing that the mini-mates gave us that we haven't gotten anywhere else are figures of Uncle Ben and Aunt May. Now, these guys are vital to the story of Spider-Man, and they really played them up in this movie. Of course, Aunt May was played by Forrest Gump's mom, Sally Field, and Uncle Ben was played by President Bartlett himself, Martin Sheen. And here they are as much, much younger actors, and holy cow, Sally Field, she's a fox, my gosh. But here in the mini-mates, they come back and we get good representation of them. This is another part of the story that Amazing Spider-Man really took from the Ultimate books, because you guys may not believe this, but in the original telling of Spider-Man, in Amazing Fantasy 15, the very first appearance of Spider-Man, his origin story, Uncle Ben appears in 3 panels. 3 panels! The person who is the absolute heart and crux of the entire Spider-Man origin story, the man who told Peter that with great power there must also come great responsibility, only appeared in 3 panels. It is remarkable that they have built 60 years of continuity on a 12-page story in which the main motivating factor was only in 3 panels. So when Brian Michael Bendis took over Ultimate Spider-Man and basically was tasked with kind of reimagining Spidey for the 2000s, he spread that origin story out. Instead of just a 12-page origin story like we saw in Amazing Fantasy 15, he spread it over 6 issues. And what that allowed was it allowed the audience to really create a relationship with Uncle Ben and to understand him better and to really feel the loss when Uncle Ben was tragically killed, leading Spider-Man down the path that he went. So I think that we need to credit Steve Ditko and Stan Lee for being able to tell a story in 12 pages that has lasted 60 years. But I think we should credit Mark Bagley and Brian Michael Bendis and the makers of Amazing Spider-Man film for giving us more depth to our Uncle Ben. Now, there were several import figures that were made of the Amazing Spider-Man. I did get 2 of the 12-inch figures. This one is from the Medicom Real Action Heroes line. Oh, I love those metallic lenses. That really, really pops and brings that gold out. He definitely has much more of the rubber suit, and when you get him into some kind of crouchy, bendy poses, you can see kind of that material and how that works. I mean, you can tell what it feels like just looking at it on the screen. Really, really good body shape for this one. Great detailing on the back, terrific details all the way down to his shoes. Really, really nice figure. But they also, Hot Toys, made a version as well. And I actually don't think I like the suit quite as much. I think I like the darker blue, even though I think this one is more accurate. It has more of those speed lines and things that you see on there. Of course, it's got the terrific hand sculpts. But this one came with an Andrew Garfield head. And that's pretty powerful. He's a little scuffed. I think he was probably battling the lizard with this one. But these are, spectacular 12-inch figures from import brands. And there were a couple of 6-inch figures that came from imports as well, one of which came from Mafex. Good grief, this is 6 inches of plastic perfection. everything that we have seen in these previous figures has totally been topped by what we're looking at here in these promotional images of the Mafex Amazing Spider-Man figure. I didn't get this figure when it first came out, and this is what it is selling for on eBay these days, so I don't see this figure coming to my collection anytime soon. While I'll never own that Mafex figure, I did pick up this one from the company Figma, and it's really cool. It's got this super metallic look to it. The red really pops, and that makes those gold eyelets really stand out. He's a little flimsy when you try to pose him, so you have to be careful with him. And truthfully, he's got some kind of wonky joints. These shoulders don't really look good in any kind of resting pose, but they certainly work better when you get him into sort of crouchy, Spidey poses, which, you know, I mean, that's what you're going for. The knees, though, are weird. I mean, look at that. Even just standing at rest, he's got this huge Baker cyst coming off the back of his knee. Again, if you get him into a full crouch, it's not that bad. Oh, his head's popping off again. But if you just look at him or want him in any kind of static pose, it's really difficult to get him looking right. So those really figures, those bring out the good in this movie. Let's talk about what wasn't so good. And obviously that really starts with our main antagonist, the Lizard. So Dr. Kirk Connors was working at Osborn. He was, trying to figure out a way to replicate lizard DNA, wants to replace his missing arm. But that part stayed true to the comics, and then it got really, really weird. His main motivation was to turn everyone in New York into lizard people. And to that effect, Minimates actually gave us a couple of police officers that came with their lizardized heads. Ugh. That's the difference between the MCU and other superhero movies. So many of these movies think, oh yeah, that's just a comic booky story. We'll just make the villain a comic booky villain. And this lizard story is about as comic booky as they get. And it's weaker for it. The motivation of Dr. Octopus in Spider-Man 2 or the Vulture in, Spider-Man Homecoming, they're so much more grounded in reality. Instead of trying to make a comic book movie, I feel like the MCU and Sam Raimi also tried to make good movies. Whereas this movie really seemed to be, oh, this is a comic book movie. Let's make it like what a comic book movie is supposed to be. And I really do. I think that's a huge weakness. But we did get this, 6-inch lizard really, really bad when you try to tilt his head back that you can see this giant gaping neck articulation. But, other than that, it's a pretty solid figure. And he got a mini-mate as well. So here's little lizard hanging out with big lizard. But when you take a look at these figures in total, it really shows the strength and the weaknesses of the first Amazing Spider-Man film. So the Amazing Spider-Man was a big success. Sure, it wasn't perfect, but you had two handsome lead actors to build around and a hungry fan base. What could go wrong? Plus, at this point, Hasbro had figured things out on the action figure side. Marvel Legends were back and better than ever. So for Amazing Spider-Man 2, we got 2 figures. Just 2 lousy figures. And don't tell me they weren't making movie figures, because the wave before this had 3 figures from Captain America Civil War, and the wave after this had 4 and a Build-A-Figure from Guardians of the Galaxy. Why? Why so little product? It's because this wasn't a very good movie. Okay, guys, here is my paltry collection of Amazing Spider-Man 2 figures. Just not enough product really released for this movie, but let's take a look at what we did get, beginning with the Hasbro Marvel Legends Spider-Man. Now, if we're going to have a conversation about this movie, we need to be able to accept that 2 things can be true at the same time. That it can be true that Andrew Garfield was a decent Spider-Man, and that this movie was complete and total garbage. Both of those things can be true. It can be true that Andrew Garfield was the quippiest and the funniest and the wittiest actor who has portrayed Peter Parker, and that the plot of this movie literally made no sense. It was like they threw a bunch of stuff in a blender and then just slapped it down on the screen. Both of those things can be true. So you guys can love Andrew Garfield and still admit that this movie was a hot mess. I mean, it just... And we're going to go through all the different reasons why I think this movie was just crap, as we look at these figures. But this is our first figure, and of course it is Spider-Man in the costume that he wore in Amazing Spider-Man 2, which is a really, really classic costume. Classic head, looks like a 90s Spider-Man head. He does still have kind of the larger spider emblem on the chest, and the homage emblem to the Sam Raimi films on the back. But he's got, the sort of tracksuit, vibe going on with the rough stuff. But that is a incredibly comic accurate Spider-Man costume, which is cool, except for the fact that we just talked about the fact that this movie was trying to differentiate itself from what had come before. And so what is their first move when they come out on screen? Let's go with a much more classic costume. That just doesn't make sense to me. Plus, with all of Tom Holland's costume changes through his trilogy, there's at least been some explanation as to why he was wearing something different. They actually managed to work it into the plot of the film. Not here. Nope. He's just new costume, looks like the comics, let's go. But that's the kind of just lack of thought that this plot had all the way through. I mean, the movie begins with this James Bond action scene of Peter's parents, and Peter then spends some amount of time in the movie trying to figure out, what happened to his parents, what was their backstory, and thankfully that plot was resolved with, oh no, it wasn't resolved at all. It literally was just left hanging. They start the movie with a story that then has no end, that has no finish whatsoever, but kind of par for the course for the writing of this film. I like this figure. If you're a fan of the channel, you know how much I love Articulation, and you can see me just sitting here playing with it. I love to get Spidey into some cool poses, and they tried to do some things different, particularly with these shoulder joints. And I guess it's okay. I mean, he can definitely get back and, do some of those cool flying poses, and he can get his arms much more in front of him than really any other figure. But when he's in any sort of static pose, the visuals of that articulation just doesn't look really great. The other thing is, what's up with those hips? How on earth are his legs connected to his torso? I mean, even from this angle, look at that. I mean, his hips are literally jutting out from the rest of his body. I mean, maybe they could have shaved down that T-joint and brought these things to where they actually were in the socket that is designed right there. But a good figure can't call it a great figure when you have some articulation issues like this. So let's take a look at our second kind of classic Spider-Man from this film, and boy, this one is a classic. I mean, this is the Diamond Select, Marvel Select comic shop exclusive figure, and again, really, really nice. Love the color on this. Love the red and blue. Very clean decal for the Raimi-esque Spidey on the back, and man, these web lines are tight, and that kind of white pearlescent eyelets on this mask, so good. They never quite got that right on the Sam Raimi movies, but they really, really nailed it here. He's got, super great articulation for a Marvel Select figure. They're not trying to be as articulated as a Marvel Legend figure. His hips fit into the socket of his pelvis a little bit better. That's kind of nice. Got some, rocker ankles going on with the feet. The one problem that I have with this figure, and it's really the only problem I have, is his neck seems too short. It's, it's like his head, he has this long body, like very reminiscent of the gymnast sort of, longer frame that Andrew Garfield has. They fixed the fact that the shoulders were so muscular on the Diamond Select from the first movie. So these are much, much better. But then his head looks like it's just too squat down into his body. So this is so close to perfect. It's really, really close, particularly with how good that paint application is. But we just need to move his head up just a little bit. Now, our other Marvel Legends figure was another, like, so close. So here's Jamie Foxx as Electro, and once again, much like what we found with Dr. Kirk Connors, it's like the writers and the editors of this movie were like, it's a comic book movie. We can just, make it a comic booky sort of story. So I'm not going to get mad about the fact that he fell into a vat of eels and that the electric power fixed the gap between his teeth. There's been enough, mashing of that. But it's more that, like, his motivation was, oh, I'm Spider-Man's buddy, and then Spider-Man doesn't remember me, and so now I'm going to be bad. Like, that's terrible. That's just really, really crappy plotting. But, Marvel Legends gave us a decent figure, and what I really like is that this was the time where they started to give us alternate heads and alternate hands, so you can have Electro in a little bit more of a calmer situation without the electricity shooting out of his eyes and with regular fists, or he can come back with these really, really cool electricity fists. Those are so nice. And they've done a good job with comic accurate Electros using something very similar to these. So I like that very much. It's like Jamie Foxx. Jamie Foxx is a good actor, and you could see that. You could see that he was a good actor because his portrayal of Electro in No Way Home was so much better than the crazy town that was going on in this movie. Of course, they did make some mini-mates of Electro as well, so we've got a couple of those. This movie did get Happy Meal toys. This is a McDonald's Happy Meal toy. I really actually like this. It's for, something that just was packed in with your Happy Meal. It's pretty sweet. I'm so sad it doesn't look like there's a screw or a way to take this apart, because the eyes would light up. But unfortunately, that battery has now died. When we're talking about, 8 years old, that battery just didn't last. But really solid for a Happy Meal toy. That's nothing wrong with that. That's pretty good. We're having to dig down into the mini-mates to get after some more figures. Here is the classic, the regular version. Nicely done. All of the detail and the cuteness that you expect from mini-mates. And then here is the battle damaged version, again, where he's wearing his fireman's hat that he had on at the end of the movie when he doused Electro with water. And truthfully, the whole fireman's hat thing just bothers the crap out of me. Because, yes, I like the fact that we got a quippy Spider-Man with Andrew Garfield. I like that. I like that, he had some humor to him. But the movie seemed like it was more focused on him being quippy than it was on him being heroic. Like, you're in the middle of a fight where people are dying in the middle of Manhattan, and you take the time to go and throw on a fireman's hat so that you can spray Electro with water. It was just kind of, I guess, disrespectful is the best word to the heroism that Peter Parker brings to so many people, that Spider-Man inspires in so many people as a character, that they kind of gave up a little bit of that for the quips. And I mean, another example of that was the scene with Rhino where he stops him, where he's like hanging onto the side of the car and he's like making jokes and making fun of him and doing some good Spidey stuff. Unfortunately, while that's going on, the Rhino is like plowing down pedestrians. And, that's the same to me of, Batman using guns on the Batmobile and blowing up the bad guys. Like, that is not who he is. You can't sacrifice one part of who the character is in order to try to get another part. You've got to find a way to do both. Now, one of the best parts of the movie, for sure, the best part of the movie was the relationship between Gwen Stacy and Peter Parker. And it's because Emma Stone and Andrew Garfield just had incredible chemistry on screen. They had it off screen too, because they were dating during this time, but it really, really came through on screen. Unfortunately, it seemed like, Gwen went from being kind of an equal partner to Peter, someone who was as smart as he was, someone who was as capable as he was, that in this movie she went to the makeup breakup girlfriend action, and then just the damsel in distress. And I hate that. I think that's a terrible use of an actress with the quality that Emma Stone brought to this role. And of course, I'm still, even though I know exactly what happens to Gwen in the comics, I am still super upset that it happened to her again in this movie. That was terrible. And then lastly, what I think is maybe the craptasticest part of this movie is the whole Harry Osborn storyline. So let's ignore the fact that Harry Osborn is dying from the Osborn curse. What is the Osborn curse, you say? Beats me, because it's not explained at any point in the movie. You just have Norman Osborn looking like he's got some kind of cancer and dying, and then the scrawny little actor who's playing Harry ends up getting it and going insane. And, his only role in this movie, well, one, he's supposed to be Peter's old friend, which makes a lot of sense, except for the fact that in the first movie, Peter has no clue about Oscorp or Osborn or any of that, and you're supposed to just accept that, oh yeah, no, but he was friends with Harry all along. No, that's not good. That's not good storytelling. And then he's really only there just to drop Gwen to her death. And, they cram his fight scene in right at the very end of the movie. Just bad, guys. It just wasn't very good. So it breaks my heart. It breaks my heart that a good Spider-Man, Andrew Garfield, was a good Spider-Man. He brought everything to this role. He absolutely gave it his best. He clearly loved being Spider-Man, and he brought the funny. He brought that ultimate Spider-Man sensibility to things, and he was great at that. But he was saddled in a second movie that made no sense, that seemed like it was designed by the marketing people to set up other movies instead of by the director and the creative people to tell a good story. And the end result was the end of his time as Spider-Man. So what do you guys think? Am I way off base on my assessment of Andrew Garfield's time as Spider-Man? Tell me about it in the comments, and then click that subscribe button. And when you're finished with that, check out this great series on Spidey's action figure history and their comic origins.